Whispers of the Ancients, Episode 11. The Kingdom of Kongo, Lords of the River, approximately 1390 to 1857 CE. A whisper from the river. Beneath the vast skies of Central Africa, where the mighty Congo River winds like a serpent of silver through green forests and red earth, a kingdom once rose brilliant and bold. The Kingdom of Kongo, forged not in isolation but in connectivity, stood as a beacon of diplomacy, innovation and cultural synthesis. Here rivers did not divide, they connected. Here, power was not forged in the sword alone, but through cloth, copper, conversation, and cross-currents of trade. Here, the voices of kings, priests, farmers, and foreign envoys echoed in royal courts and forest clearings alike. This is their story, a tale of statecraft and spirituality, alliance and adversity, remembered in oral traditions, Portuguese chronicles, and the enduring dignity of a people who once ruled the riverbanks. Let us begin. Segment 1. The cradle between rivers, geography and the birth of a kingdom in the basin of the Congo River, one of the world's largest and most powerful waterways, lies a land carved by nature and networked by human hands. It is here, in the fertile valleys and elevated plateaus of what is now northern Angola and the western Democratic Republic of the Congo, that the Kingdom of Kongo emerged. The river was life. It nourished crops of millet, yams and bananas. It enabled travel between regions, and it served as the spine of economic and political unity. Surrounding the waterway, a mosaic of Bantu-speaking peoples cultivated land, herded livestock, and participated in local trade long before any central authority came into being. By the late 14th century, these decentralized chiefdoms began to coalesce under the leadership of a charismatic figure named Lukini Luanimi. From the small polity of Mbanza Kongo, Lukini expanded his control through a combination of diplomacy, intermarriage, and conquest. His crowning achievement was the founding of Mbanza Kongo, the city of Congo, which would become one of the most significant political capitals in sub-Saharan Africa. Segment 2. The rise of Mbanza Kongo, heart of a centralized state. Mbanza Kongo was more than a city, it was an idea, built atop a plateau with commanding views of the surrounding countryside. It represented unity among previously fragmented clans and lineages. With its stone buildings, wide plazas, and elaborate court rituals, the city quickly became a center of prestige and power. At the core of Kongo's administration was a structured hierarchy. The king, known as the maniKongo, or Lord of Congo, sat at the apex of authority. Beneath him were governors of the 6 provinces, Mpemba, Mbata, Nsandi, Mabamba, Soyo, and Mpangu. Each of these had their own capitals and local noble classes, but all paid tribute and swore loyalty to the maniKongo. The political system was remarkably sophisticated. There were councils of elders, priests, and nobles who advised the monarch, and there were messengers and scribes who carried out the affairs of state. Power was not inherited in a direct bloodline. Rather, the elite often chose the most capable candidate from the royal family, usually through consensus and intrigue. Segment 3. The maniKongo and his mantle, authority, symbolism, and spiritual power. The maniKongo was more than a political ruler, he was the living embodiment of the kingdom. His presence inspired awe, his words were law, and his attire was symbolic, clad in fine cloth, copper jewelry, and ceremonial regalia. The maniKongo held the Nkisi, a sacred object infused with spiritual force. Through it, he could mediate between the physical and spiritual worlds. Kongo belief systems revolved around a dual cosmos, the world of the living and the world of the dead. Bridged by ancestors and spirits, priests, diviners, and healers guided people in rituals to maintain cosmic harmony. Sacred groves, ancestral shrines, and power figure statues embedded with nails and blades were common features of Kongo religious life. The king's legitimacy rested not only on lineage but on spiritual efficacy. A ruler who could bring rain, health, and victory was blessed by the spirits. But a king who failed, who presided over drought, disease, or defeat, might be overthrown by nobles or replaced by divine will. Segment 4. Threads of wealth, trade, currency, and the power of cloth. Kongo's location made it a nexus of trade long before European contact. The kingdom's economy flourished through the production and distribution of raffia cloth, salt, iron tools, ivory, copper and palm oil. Cloth woven in geometric patterns from raffia fiber served as both currency and symbol of status. Copper, mined locally or imported from the interior, was shaped into bracelets called nzimbu shells, which also functioned as a form of currency. Markets bustled with merchants exchanging food, pottery, livestock and luxury goods. Coastal provinces like Soyo maintained maritime connections with neighboring peoples and, eventually, with Europeans. Inland, caravans traveled as far as the Luba and Lunda territories, exchanging goods, stories and ideas. Trade routes connected Congo to the great web of Central Africa, enhancing its power and prestige. Segment 51483, When Worlds Collide, Congo meets Portugal. In 1483, Portuguese caravels reached the mouth of the Congo River and sent envoys to the royal court. What they encountered in Mbanza Kongo astonished them: a centralized state with urban infrastructure, royal councils and elaborate court ceremonies. The maniKongo at the time, Nzinga Nkuwu, welcomed the Portuguese as potential allies. He saw in them access to firearms, horses and new trade opportunities. In 1491, after negotiations, Nzinga was baptized as Juo I, taking a Christian name and beginning a century-long religious and political entanglement. This moment was historic not because it marked a conquest, but because it was a negotiation of equals. Congo would not fall under colonial rule for centuries. Instead, it would engage Portugal as a sovereign state, navigating a complex relationship of mutual benefit, cultural exchange, and rising tension. Segment 6, Crossroads of the Congo, Trade, Culture and Cosmopolitanism. By the 16th century, the Kingdom of Kongo had matured into a dynamic nexus of trade, diplomacy, and cultural synthesis. Its strategic location between the Atlantic coast and the interior river systems enabled the Congo elite to serve as intermediaries between inland societies and Portuguese merchants. Congo's merchants did not merely export goods, they brokered influence. Ivory, copper, raffia cloth, and enslaved individuals were exchanged for European firearms, textiles, glass beads, and luxury goods. The capital of Mbanza Kongo bustled with activity, a cosmopolitan city where the Congo nobles mingled with Portuguese traders, missionaries, and interpreters. Far from being passive recipients of European culture, the Congo elite were shrewd negotiators. They selectively adopted technologies and fashions that enhanced their prestige while maintaining their authority and traditions. Congo's kings and governors wore elaborately embroidered robes, sometimes made of imported velvet, while their retainers carried feathered stuffs of office. These material displays were more than decoration, they were political theater. Urban centers like Mbanza Kongo were adorned with stone churches, administrative buildings, and noble residences. Despite the European architectural influence, construction often relied on local techniques: earthen walls, thatched roofs, and circular layouts that harmonized with the rhythms of village life. The city was organized with a mix of formality and familiarity, echoing both African traditions and Portuguese ambitions. The kingdom's inland regions, meanwhile, maintained older rhythms. Rural life was structured around kinship compounds and agricultural production. Plantains, yams, and cassava were grown in abundance, while palm oil and fish contributed to both local sustenance and interregional trade. Local artisans crafted tools, textiles, and ritual objects, preserving cultural identity even as external influences grew. Segment 7a, Sacred State, Religion, Conversion, and Cosmology. The Kingdom of Kongo's encounter with Christianity was unlike any other on the continent. In 1491, King Nzinga Nkuwu accepted baptism, adopting the name Juo I in honor of Portugal's reigning monarch. His conversion, however, was not the end but the beginning of a long and complex spiritual negotiation. Juo's son and successor, Afonso I reigned c. 1509 to 1542, embraced Catholicism fervently. Educated by missionaries, Afonso corresponded with the Pope, established schools, and requested religious texts in Kongo. Under his rule, Christianity took root at court, leading to the construction of churches, the training of native priests, and the formation of a Christian elite. Yet this Christianization did not obliterate indigenous beliefs. Rather, it layered itself upon them. The Bakongo cosmology, with its veneration of ancestral spirits, the sacredness of the land, and the power of Nkisi spirit-infused objects, coexisted with the veneration of saints, crosses, and holy water. The spirits of the land were never banished. They were baptized. This syncretic spirituality produced a unique religious worldview. Saints were seen as powerful ancestors. Jesus and Mary were invoked alongside local spirits. The cross became a symbol of both divine salvation and ancestral protection. Funerary rites, community rituals, and healing ceremonies blended Christian liturgy with traditional incantations. Some missionaries were disturbed by what they saw as superstition, but others adapted, learning Kikongo and integrating local customs into their teachings. The resulting faith was neither fully European nor entirely African. It was uniquely Congo. Forged in the fire of negotiation and devotion. Segment 8. Power in the provinces, governance, and regional lords. At its core, the Kingdom of Kongo was a federation. While the king wielded ultimate authority, his power relied on consensus among provincial rulers and the support of powerful lineages. The kingdom's vast territory was divided into 6 major provinces, each governed by a maniKongo appointed noble or local chief. These provincial lords or sobers owed tribute to the king, but often maintained considerable autonomy. They administered justice, collected taxes, raised armies, and oversaw religious rituals within their domains. In return, the maniKongo bestowed honors, mediated disputes, and sanctioned marriages or inheritance rights that preserved dynastic harmony. Congo's legal system blended customary law with royal decrees. Disputes were adjudicated by councils of elders, lineage heads, or appointed judges. Offenses ranged from theft and sorcery to adultery and political intrigue. Punishments were restorative rather than punitive, aimed at restoring balance within the community. Fines, public apologies, or ritual cleansing were more common than imprisonment or corporal punishment. Loyalty to the king was affirmed through ceremonies, oaths, and symbolic gifts. The act of drinking from a royal vessel or donning a sacred garment bound nobles to their sovereign. Yet the king, too, was bound by moral obligations to protect the people, uphold justice, and honor tradition. Crucially, the royal court was not static. The maniKongo often moved across the provinces, performing rituals, hearing grievances, and distributing largesse. These royal progresses reaffirmed the king's presence and allowed him to manage both ambition and dissent among his subordinates. Segment 9. The shadow of slavery, entanglement with the Atlantic trade. If the Kingdom of Kongo soared in power, it did so with a shadow cast long and dark: the growing trade in enslaved Africans. As the Portuguese demand for labor in the New World intensified, so too did their pressure upon African partners to supply captives. Congo's rulers found themselves entangled in this web. While slavery had existed locally as punishment or debt bondage, the scale and brutality of Atlantic slavery transformed its nature. Congo's nobles, lured by imported goods and firearms, began to raid rival territories or sentence criminals to enslavement for profit. The coastal town of Mpinda became a major slave port, where captives were held before being shipped to Sao Tome, Brazil, or the Caribbean. Some were prisoners of war, others were victims of judicial manipulation or betrayal. Families were torn apart, lineages dissolved, the kingdom's moral fabric frayed. King Afonso I, disturbed by the corruption this trade unleashed, wrote numerous letters to the King of Portugal pleading for control. He denounced rogue merchants, complained of fraudulent baptisms, and attempted to impose royal oversight. But the tide was too strong. European greed, African complicity, and imperial ambition fed the slave trade like a ravenous beast. This participation came at a cost: the loss of population, erosion of internal trust, and militarization of society undermined Congo's cohesion. What began as a calculated alliance became a tragic compromise, one whose consequences would echo for centuries. Segment 10. The dance of faith, Catholicism, Congolese tradition, and syncretism. The arrival of Catholicism in the Kingdom of Congo was not merely an act of foreign imposition. It was a dance of slow, often awkward, sometimes graceful interweaving of two very different spiritual worldviews. When Nzinga Nkubu accepted baptism in 1491 and became Juo I, Christianity gained its first formal foothold. But the embrace was not total, nor was it ever entirely one-sided. The Congolese people reinterpreted the teachings of Christianity through their own cosmology. Saints became akin to ancestral spirits, and relics carried the weight of both Christian and local power. The crucifix was displayed beside traditional symbols of kingship, and churches were built, not to replace, but to exist alongside older sacred spaces. This blending birthed something uniquely Congolese, a syncretic Christianity that bore the scent of the forest and the cadence of the drum, while missionaries from Portugal sometimes frowned at the corruption of doctrine. For many in the Congo, this faith was alive, rooted in community, guided by ancestors and infused with the rhythms of the land. Some Congolese leaders, especially King Afonso I, attempted to purify the practice, seeking to align more closely with European orthodoxy. He invited missionaries, wrote eloquent letters to the Portuguese crown, and even established a Latin school for the elite. But even Afonso could not quell the deep current of indigenous belief that flowed through his people's veins. Segment 11, Echoes of Injustice, the Rise of the Slave Trade. By the 17th century, the alliance with Portugal, once a source of prestige and power, had begun to rot from within. The Atlantic slave trade first to trickle, then a torrent twisted the relationship into something darker, more exploitative. What began as the controlled export of war captives or criminals grew into a system of plunder. Portuguese merchants, joined by Dutch and later English competitors, demanded ever more human lives. In exchange came guns, cloth, beads, and alcohol goods that fueled cycles of violence and dependency. The Kingdom of Kongo, like many African polities, was both participant and victim. Internal rivalries grew sharper as factions vied for control of slave routes and access to foreign arms. Nobles enriched themselves by selling rivals. Communities turned on one another. The once proud alliance had mutated into a machinery of commodification. But not all voices were silent. King Garcia to condemn the abuses, local priests preached against the corruption. Families fled to forest sanctuaries to escape the raids, and beneath the suffering the old values still pulsed: kinship, dignity, the sacredness of human life. Segment 12, the Battle of Mbwala, collapse at the crossroads in 1665. The long arc of Congo's independence was broken in a single, shattering blow: the Battle of Mbwala. Tensions with the Portuguese had been simmering for decades. When King Antonio I sought to assert his authority and curb Portuguese interference, it led to open confrontation. Near the village of Mbwala, the Congo army disciplined and proud clashed with Portuguese forces, bolstered by thousands of African auxiliaries. The battle was brutal. Despite valiant resistance, the Congolese were overwhelmed. Antonio was killed, along with many of the kingdom's nobles and intellectual elite. The capital was ransacked. The body politic of Congo, decapitated and stunned, spiraled into civil war. In the aftermath, the kingdom fractured into rival claimants to the throne. The once glorious capital of Mbanza Kongo became a shell of its former self. Foreign powers, Portugal, the Dutch, even the British, saw an opportunity to deepen their influence. Congo, though never fully colonized in this period, was increasingly at the mercy of external forces, and yet the soul of the kingdom endured. Segment 13, Resilience and Ritual. The Congo spirit persists, even in decline. The people of the Kingdom of Kongo did not surrender their identity. In scattered villages and forest enclaves, traditions were maintained. In the cities, songs and dances told stories of ancient kings and sacred rivers. The Congo worldview centered on the circular flow of life. The boundary between the living and the dead, the importance of balance remained vibrant. Christianity, too, persisted, but in new forms. The Antonian movement of the early 18th century, led by a visionary woman named Beatrice Kimperweiter, fused Catholic and Bakongo beliefs into a revolutionary message. She declared herself the reincarnation of Saint Anthony and preached that Jesus was born in Congo. Her movement sought to restore unity, dignity, and spiritual clarity to a fractured kingdom, though the movement was suppressed and Beatrice was martyred. Her legacy lived on. She became a symbol of resistance, a testament to the spiritual resilience of a people who refused to be erased. Segment 14. The River Never Forgets. Congo's legacy today. Today, the echoes of the Kingdom of Kongo ripple far beyond the banks of the Congo River. In Cuba, Brazil, Haiti, and the American South, the descendants of enslaved Congolese carried with them fragments of language, rhythm, and ritual. The pounding of the drum, the invocation of ancestors. The vibrant fusion of faiths all bear the imprint of the Congo genius. In Angola and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, cultural movements have sought to reclaim the kingdom's legacy. Mbanza Kongo is once again a place of pilgrimage and pride, declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2017. Scholars and guides continue to unearth the stories buried beneath centuries of erasure. The Kingdom of Kongo may have lost its throne, but not its voice. It speaks in proverbs, in prayers, in dance. It reminds us that power can fade, but spirit endures.